Welcome to Chaos2Cured podcast. You're here with Jeffrey Freed and Kirk Patrick Miller. This show, we're going to focus on autism. So, being on the autistic spectrum, Jeffrey Freed is a world-renowned expert on this one, and there's going to be some really unique ideas thrown out here. So, tune in. This should be a fun discussion. There's some of my favorite people to work with. And just spectacular individuals. So, Jeffrey, I'm just going to literally hop right over to you and just go with it.
Yeah, my pleasure. I've been working with people on the spectrum since I was about 35. I'm now 74, so it's almost 40 years. And I work with everybody one-on-one. I don't do group work because I feel that when I charge what I charge, which isn't a lot, but it's enough that I feel that people should get the best. And I just want to do one-on-one. It's just so much more effective. Autism, I have a different take on it, and it's worth listening to because like I said, I've been doing this for a long, long time and worked with so many people, well over 1,000. So with a lot of success. So I'm gonna tell you what I think of it. Autism, to me, is like a defense mechanism. What happens is these very, very visual, highly sensitive people come into the world, and it's just too loud, cacophonous, sensory bombardment, just their senses are all heightened. And there are no autistic people who originally didn't have hypersensitivities. So imagine a little guy, a little girl, whatever, coming into the world, and everything hurts. The clothes that they wrap them in hurts. These lights hurt. They can hear the electricity. They can light blinds them. The electricity. They can feel it much more than most people. Sense of touch is exaggerated. So when you touch them with a little bit of pressure, it feels to them like you're hitting them. If you just talk in a normal tone, they think that you're screaming at them and start to cry. All of that is just highly sensitive people, and they got to figure out a way to get through life. So what happens when it comes on right after birth is the person's involuntary system, the nervous system, the brain, they just shut down in order to survive. If they shut down, they do not have to feel the pain. Everything's not there. I mean, they're just floating, and it's involuntary, and especially when they're real young and develop it. So of course they're not going to want to be touched. Once they're in their autistic state, doesn't matter if you touch them. Doesn't hurt because nothing does. They've shut down their intake. They're not basically getting anything. But it's for survival. Because if an autistic kid were to be the way they really are wired, they would be screaming or crying all the time. And they can't have that. So you got to come up with a system to make the world bearable. And that system is shut down. And it can vary in intensity. Some people have mild shutdown. Some people medium shutdown, some severe shutdown. When I go or hear about a home for autistic people or some kind of hospital or some kind of program for people with autism, I know going in that they're going to be visual learners. They're going to have exaggerated senses. And if they are already totally and completely withdrawn, that they really need to come up with a defense mechanism to make the world livable, and they have. And I guess the key, I don't work with too many low-functioning people. I don't think I'm an expert in that, but I am an expert in high-functioning Asperger's and also with middle-functioning people. And I just try to get them to use their visual abilities, because so many of them are highly visual, photographic memories, gifted at things like math or a particular interest. It could be science, it could be cars, but usually they're really, really into something, and they're to the exclusion of everything else. They also do repetitious type behavior. Um, a lot of times they have Tourette's. And all of this is what I want to get across. When you see someone on the spectrum who is really OCD, just major, they have to do the same thing every day. They got to nod a certain amount of times. They got to blink a certain amount of times. They've got to eat food at exactly the same time every day. And when you change it on them, they go nuts. Well, that's because they are trying to make order out of chaos. Chaos is the world. Chaos is a change. Nobody, I mean, a lot of people like change. Nobody likes massive change. But these people are so sensitive that the littlest change throws them off their game, and they're in chaos. And when they're in chaos, they're panicking, and it's a horrible feeling. So they'll do anything to establish at least an illusion of routine and order in their chaotic lives. That's really understandable once you figure it out. And it's not like a lot of experts think of autism as a condition where you don't pick up enough. You have no central coherence. Your world is just not figured out yet. And that's kind of a deficit model of autism that I do not subscribe to at all. I subscribe to a definition of autism called the intense world syndrome. And a lot of really innovative people that you probably haven't heard of them because they're only known in the autism community. But these folks think what I think. They think that the person with autism not only doesn't have a deficit to pick up things, they have a surplus. They're picking up so much information that they don't know what to do with it. So, out of sheer force of will, they shut it all down and just do ritualistic things to get through the day. It's a hard way to live your life, but it's all they can do.
You know,
What else can you do?
it's something when you bring up some of those points. Everybody who's listened to our podcast knows we've consistently shown there's a lot of similarities. What you mentioned with explosions, with change in patterns, absolutely happens with me with OCD. It helps me relate to individuals I work with that do have autism because I can almost feel it coming up. There's a few things I want to give one example because it still blows my mind for people that are wondering what you were talking about with hypersensitivity, because oftentimes we hear the word but we don't understand and grasp the gravity of it. So when I tune in a violin, or what happens is the two strings, of course, match. A computer will tell you, okay, there's an E and an A. When I hear the two strings, I hear a pulse. That pulse gets faster and faster and faster and vanishes when they're in tune. It's literally hearing the sound waves clash. It's something people with perfect, or what they call absolute pitch, can do. I can hear a note. I know if it's in tune. It drives me crazy going through Las Vegas. Every note is a C, E, or a G. So all of the machines are programmed with a C chord. Um, it's little things like that that are overwhelming. And for me, I I think I've expressed with my bipolar, um, and I've mentioned this before, and I want to get your take on it. A lot of times, for what I've seen, and it fits in with what you're kind of saying, the defense mechanism is not something um, that I disagree with at all. I really do agree with it. For me, when I was not under control, when I was not stable, the bipolar actually protected me. And you and I just recently talked about this, just in life. Sometimes I actually miss the the bipolar, not because I miss the mania, not because I miss the depression, It has nothing to do with that. When I was in that mental state, the world didn't hurt as much. I never cried at a movie. I never got sad. I really, and my emotions, what I emoted was typically reflective. It was so aggressive and explosive because a lot of times I'd tune stuff out, and by the time people got my attention, they had already lit my fuse. So my body was picking up things before my mind really was aware. And then by the time my mind processed it, it was kind of like a snowball, went out of control, spazzed out, and I would explode outwards. Now, the thing for me, and the reason I brought up the bipolar is for me, all of my things were outwards. And I have noticed, and I want to get your take on this, the individuals that I've worked with that are often on the spectrum. So, especially in the middle group that you were talking about, and definitely in the more extreme ones, I have not dealt with many. There were 2 or 3 that I can think of. And I felt like they retreated inwards. So there are so many similarities between some of the different mental health things. But for me, that was something that I have noticed, and the drawing inwards. And that's whereas I feel like with some of the other ones, you get an outwards explosion. It's the same in a lot of ways. What everything you described is some of the things I felt. And I think that's why I can relate to some of it. So I do agree with you. Besides creating a better or a, a, can you give some tips on things that you would suggest? Because this, and we've talked about this, people can listen to our hypersensitivity thing, but just right now for autistic children, what are some things like right now, maybe 5 to 10 things you might suggest to make their days a little smoother so that they have a better chance of success?
All right, I'm not going to say 10 things, um, but I will comment on it. I would say that, and a lot of people do know this. This particular topic is not so controversial or anything. It's pretty well known. You can do things like theaters and plays have autistic friendly showings where they cut out the pyrotechnics, and they use, they dull the sound, and they encourage people to bring things like earplugs to use, and everyone's using them. The most important thing is to tap into that and realize that that's growing because the number of people on the spectrum are growing, and there's more recognition of it too. So both those things are true. But you need to try to establish a routine, and you need to come up with the same thing every day or most every day. It's not that they're particularly linear, because they're not. It's just that the only way they can function is if there is an order or a sequence, and so they're not surprised. And here's the point I want to make. Really, I can't overstress this. When an autistic person, or a person with autism, I'll say that, is in any situation, like a lot of people, like some kind of pyrotechnic show, what happens is they hear so much, they feel so much that they panic. Anxiety is probably the most debilitating symptom of autism, and everybody with autism has exaggerated anxiety because they have exaggerated senses, and we're all a little anxious, so they're going to be anxious to the third or fourth power. The other thing that's universal is lack of sleep problems. There's 2 things: sleep problems and stomach problems. So particularly, I don't know anybody on the spectrum who's got a good digestive system. They all have problems. The statistic is over 90%. That's supposedly a hard statistic. 90% of people on the spectrum have major digestive issues. Well, that's
Wow.
because
Like,
they're so
let,
stressed, and the stomach is where they store it. The other thing is, lack of sleep, and the lack of sleep is their brain. They're suffering from overexcitation. Everything is fight or flight, and when they fight, I mean, they're so aroused naturally that they get sick often. They have stomach issues. They can't relax at night. They keep replaying the game over and over again. So what you want to do is you want to be very calm, ordered. Life is full of changes, but let them know. If you know a change is coming, like summertime is coming and they're not in school anymore and they're not at daycare, they're going to be home or in another daycare place, tell them about it. Have them visit the new daycare place. Make the change as smoothly as possible. Don't yell at them. If they start having a temper tantrum, make the comment to the person, I can't help you when you're like this, so I'm gonna leave, and I want you to try to get it out of your system, and let me know when you want me to when you want to engage again, and then just be prepared for screaming, yelling, or whatever, or throwing things, and you might establish some ground rules like you can't throw this and that, but you can throw that, like stuffed animal or something.
Or
But you
ice
have
cubes. That's a
yeah,
good
that's a
one.
great one. But what you want to do is you want to not repress them because I mean it's no accident that so many of these shooters and people that kill themselves as well as others are on the spectrum. They're just they don't want to talk about things because to talk about a problem brings the problem up again, so they relive it twice, and that is so painful that they'll avoid talking about stuff, and they don't want to be thought of as weird, so they'll just stuff everything. You stuff stuff and you don't talk about it because it makes you unhappy to talk about it, and again you relive the experience again. So what you do is you stuff it, repress it, and when it comes out it can be so powerful, and it will come out. If it doesn't come out, it'll come out another way, like illness or injury or something, because it stresses the immune systems so much. Avoid
Absolutely.
avoid spicy foods, and with the stomach stuff, the most important thing to do is give them free or um, probiotics. There's so much stuff. I mean, I read every book I can find on autism, and there's so much research that says that people with autism usually have unhealthy biomes in their gut. So anything you can do to have them eat predictably and healthfully will help. Because they're stressed so much, what they tend to do is they like to carbohydrates. They crave carbohydrates, and that's deadly. That stuff just turns to it putrefies in the intestinal system. It poisons the body. So you really need to stay away from, really a lot of carbohydrates. And you should be eating a variety of foods. Many people on the spectrum will only eat one thing or two things because the texture bothers them or the smell bothers them.
They get
Make sure
attached to one. Yep.
make sure that your kid, if it's you, make sure that you eat healthfully. Find a way to make smoothies that aren't harsh smelling. Um, just don't eat crap. You can't do it. Your system is just too hypersensitive to eat red dye number 3 or drink 2 Cokes a day. It affects everyone negatively, but it'll affect you more because you're so sensitive. So follow some of those tenets. Don't fight it. A lot of people think that what an autistic person needs is structure, 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 and there's a lot of truism in that. But don't force them to do something that they really, really have issues with. One of the big ones is clothes sensitivity. People on the spectrum cannot wear certain clothes. It feels like to them like they're gonna like they get a rash or they have
Sandpaper.
yeah, sandpaper is a good thing to compare it to. And I know parents say you're gonna wear that suit or you're gonna wear that turtleneck. I just bought it for you. effectively giving the kid a miserable 2 or 3 hours or however long they need to wear the shirt or the suit. Be gentle. Realize that it's real. It's not them being obstinate. They really feel it. And to go with them when you go shopping, have them try stuff on that's nice and soft. Some of them like real tight things, like tight fitting clothes. Most don't. Um, and honor that. That'll help a lot. And also, if you're at a loud party or some kind of birthday party or some kind of event like a football game or a water world or something like that, they're going to get tired because they're spending most of the time that they're there trying to screen out periphery. They find it overstimulating, and they can do it for a short period of time, and then after a couple hours you're looking for a major meltdown that can be pretty damn ugly. So what you want to do is you want to be aware of that and cut it to a minimum. Talk to your kid about the sensitivities and be gentle with yourself and just live within its confines.
You
um,
know, there's a couple things that I just wanted to jump on fast. One thing that's really interesting, and I want parents and individuals with or siblings and friends to know this. A lot of times, an autistic individual can be an extrovert, and at the same time, they get drained and pulled, and it's harsh. Um, when they, like you just mentioned, they go into an explosion. It's a lot like how an introvert feels when they go out and their energy is drained. Same type of thing, because they're trying to block stuff out.
yep.
There were a couple other things that you mentioned. So one, if there's gut problems, there's the gut brain axis, and there's a bunch of studies that people can look up on that. It's fascinating. So they have linked the health of your gut, and as Jeffrey had mentioned, probiotics are a game changer, and they're still learning a lot more about it. So it's worth looking into and definitely talking to your MD about. The the other thing with the food, a lot of the inflammatory foods, they've also linked inflammation to a whole bunch of mental health issues, depression, anxiety. I mean, there's a host of things that inflammation can cause. So healthy diet, all of those suggestions were spectacular. One thing that, Jeffrey, you mentioned at the beginning, like that there are places like that, where people can go and listen to a concert and it's autistic friendly. I think one of the main problems that I see is a lot of times the neurotypical parent is frustrated with the autistic child, and they don't they follow some of these things and they give them headphones to help their ears, but they don't fully understand why or how intense it feels when they're at that concert. And like you were saying, like the structure is absolutely important, and don't push children towards something. On that, I wanted to say I have quite a few parents that want their child to have that solid structure, and oftentimes it's very difficult because they were raised to believe that you have to fulfill this and this and this and this, and that's the parent. And so that when they have this child that gets excited about something, but it's outside of that linear path they see. So let's say they get excited about history or fish or something, and their school wants them to be studying math. What happens in my experience, from what I've seen, is they they feel like a failure because they try so hard to learn something else, but their brain is so open to this other um, avenue. And to me, it's kind of like if you were driving in traffic and you have one road that's totally clear and one road that's loaded up with back to back cars. You take the road that's clear.
Yeah,
But what we
perfect.
do is we force, and this is what I felt in
We
school
create
too.
traffic jams. Yeah,
Yes, my brain was overloaded at school, and I was so frustrated because I would grasp something instantly and I would have it. And then guess what? I had to sit there until I lost it. By the halfway through the class, I had already learned and then forgotten it. And by the time the class ended, I was sent home with the homework, and then I was unable to do it or frustrated with it, felt like a failure, felt like I was incomplete, felt like I couldn't ever have hope. Now, these are some of the things. I'm bringing some of these words up specifically because I, am dealing with one little one who's saying these things. And when I hear those, it breaks my heart because they get to the point where they're so beaten down and everybody keeps telling them how stupid they are or how and by the way, a lot of times that's themselves, so they
yeah, really.
feel like they're failing, because of course they're not fitting in to a system that's not even built for them. They're built more like you throw a bouncy ball. If you can imagine a sphere with ideas and knowledge everywhere, and you just throw a super ball in the middle of it and it bounces all over the place, and each time it hits one they learn that. That's more of how I see an autistic mind and even my own mind learning. I was not able to stay focused on one thing. And when they forced that, I actually lost knowledge. And then I felt stupid. And then I felt undervalued. Of course, it goes on and on and on, right? That
Yes.
leads to them feeling depressed. So,
Well, let me say this. Everybody gets moments when they're depressed. If they're, I'm talking about people who aren't clinically depressed. We all get it. Again, I'm going to say this ad nauseum. People with autism have every emotion that everyone else does, just much more so. So when they get anxious, it's extraordinarily powerful. When they get down, it's extraordinarily powerful. When they get up, it's extraordinarily exaggerated and powerful. And that's the way they're wired. And a lot of autism, like they do ABA, applied behavior analysis. I think it's what it stands for. That's pretty good for low functioning autistic people because it sort of brings them out of their shell um, gradually. But it's terrible for people who are high functioning or middle functioning because it's abrasive and it makes them withdraw more. And nobody knows that, or very few people know that. And it's so sad because there's so many people on the spectrum, and it's not an accident. They're on the spectrum because we now live in an environment which is totally cacophonous. You're getting information from everywhere. It's also polluted. The food's damaged. The water's damaged. Some of us can handle it because we have really strong immune systems and can hold up for a while. The autistic person can't because it's so strong. The emotions, the feelings, the reactions to things are so intense. That's the reason there's meltdowns. Anybody will melt down if you give them enough noise, enough pressure. But these people have to deal with the pressure all the time, even when in an environment where a neurotypical individual thinks this is great and this is very nice. The autistic person will pick up the emotions, the sounds, the music, the birds, the squirrels. Maybe two squirrels are fighting. It's exhausting and frustrating. They can't put it in words because these are picture thinkers. Picture thinkers have trouble putting stuff into words, especially when they're young. So the only way they can communicate is by having a meltdown and interrupting the process, which is driving them crazy. Now, if you're someone who lives with a person with autism, it'll help to know this. They're not being difficult just to be difficult. They can imagine, you can imagine yourself if you had those types of sensitivities, how the hell would you survive? You'd find it very, very difficult. And that's why the behaviors, which seem so odd to other people, are really survival techniques for the person on the autistic spectrum. And this environment, this current environment with constant social media, advertising everywhere, strip malls, so much competition for their attention, it is a recipe for withdrawal amongst the highly sensitive people. And that's why we're seeing more of that. I guess the general consensus is it autism is genetic. And a lot of us have the genes for autism, but they don't manifest in a calm, pleasant, like farm environment or just an agrarian environment away, just with a bunch of people that the person knows. They have it, but it doesn't really manifest too much. You take that same person and you put them in one of these suburbs or cities, and they're going to go nuts because it's just nothing but cacophony. And a lot of times they will clone to one thing, like math, or doing math calculations in their head, or reading everything about dinosaurs and becoming an expert because it helps shut down the noise when they focus intensely on something.
Oh, I absolutely agree. And you know, I think I think every single person listening to this should really understand that one of the biggest stigmas on the autistic population is that they are not intelligent or that they are sub-intelligent. And
Yep.
it drives me insane to watch some of these children get very low test grades, and they'll, you know, they can instantly learn the material if I explain it and if I go through it. And a lot of times there's anxiety in the way. They're trying so hard that the failure is more terrifying than anything else. And you brought up how that makes them shut down. So a lot of times what I found to be very helpful is, especially working with math, something like that, I will actually do the problem for them and I'll talk with them. They can watch as I do the numbers. Who cares? I'm teaching them. They pick up on it. The anxiety of not having to do that first step and second step and third step. And I do a few of them. And then what happens is they get excited. The moment they grasp it, then they feel it's fun.
Oh,
And once
interesting,
some,
Eric, because I do the same thing all the time.
oh my goodness. Well, I think a lot of the stuff that you and I talk about constantly, it cross intersects with so many different individuals that we work with and what we do. And I think sometimes I am so frustrated because I want to see, you know, these individuals appreciated. And I feel so often they are punished when they are, in my opinion, and I say this with, I believe this 100%. I believe these individuals have the ability to save humankind. And the problem is we have built a system that does not appreciate how they think. And you kind of brought up, one, you were talking a little bit about how they kind of, explode and how they get so frustrated. um, you can imagine how frustrating it is when you expect someone else to be an expert because you're young, you're 6, 7, 8 years old, and like you said, you got caught up in one book, every little thing about dinosaurs, and you're talking to a paleontologist and they have their PhD, and you sit there and you ask them a ton of questions and they don't know the answers, and or they don't get where you're going. Of course they are well educated. I'm not saying it's not a comparison of education. What I'm saying is that the it it's jarring when you feel like you want to communicate and people can't get what you're saying. And when you're trying really, really, really hard and no one in, let's face it, in a business meeting, they shut them down. We don't have time to listen to this. Boom, right there. Or in school, I'm sorry, you're interrupting the class, you're slowing the class down. Oftentimes, they're trying to tell a story, and we've talked about this a little bit before, but and to me, I see it as like a stream, and there's interlocking parts, and they just assume everybody knows all of it. So they leave parts out because they're trying to be faster, because what does everybody yell at them about? That they talk too much or that they interrupt too much. So they're always rushing. So what they do is they cut their thoughts and they try to abbreviate entire pictures and descriptions. And they do that to please everyone else. And then what happens? They get yelled at because people don't grasp the full thing. And then they shout at them because they're trying to continue to explain what everyone isn't getting. So they're trying harder, and then they get yelled at for that.
Yeah,
It's
I got,
jump on that.
yeah, we should be sort of winding it up, but I would say that the big elephant in the room, educationally and culturally, is the fact that there are much wider variations in the way people process the world than most people think. Public school is most school, I'm not going to say public because that brings up the specter of private. Schools expect, and they have as one of their fundamental tenets, that people pretty much learn alike. And I mean, there are variations, but they're not that extreme. Well, that's a lie. That's a falsehood. People learn process dramatically different. The difference between a linear sequential future accountant or bean counter and somebody who is visual, spatial, creative, intuitive, but can't stand boredom and has to learn from a teacher that they like, is it's a huge chasm. It's so incredibly wide. And if we admit that, then we're kind of saying that we can't do mass education. Well, we actually could. It's not all that difficult. All you do is you basically watch kids for the first year or two in school and figure out how do they learn. If they're extreme one way or the other, you put them with teachers who specialize in teaching in that style. And a lot of people learn pretty much alike, and you can teach them like traditionally. But the numbers of people that learned visually, hands-on, kinesthetically, and out of sequence is growing. And the number of neurotypical students is declining. At some point, what happens is the system just doesn't work anymore for enough people to justify its existence. And that's what we're seeing. That's the real core of what's wrong with education right there. The thing I call the elephant in the room.
I completely concur. And we've said before, all of these people are trying their very hardest. Just, I know we're going to close this up soon. We can maybe even follow up if people want on a secondary one, because this is a really important topic, and I feel like there's a lot of misunderstanding. So we really tried to do a good job today. As far as what, you know, I don't even remember where my point was. So I'm just going to end it with what you just said. I think there's so much that can be done. Oh, that's what I was going to say. For the education, please look into Bard and ChatGPT, because those types of things have the ability, like I said, you can have it write out some stuff that you want your child to learn, have it go through and teach it some of the stuff. You can oversee it, set them up for success. Please share this. Thank you for listening, Jeffrey. Your expertise on this subject is deeply appreciated, and I hope every single person. You have, well, for everyone listening, the one person I wanted my family member with autism to work with was Jeffrey, and there's a very good reason for that. So thank you for listening. Please reach out with any questions. We will be back the following week, and we wish everyone health and happiness. thank you so much for listening to Chaos2Cured podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please share it with everyone you know. And definitely like, follow, and subscribe. Certainly leave a comment if you'd like. Let us know what you'd like us to talk about the next time. Also, in our show notes, there should be direct links where you can follow us on our social media, as well as reach out to us directly. Thanks again, and have a great day. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on Chaos2Cured podcast are the speaker's own. All discussion is based on our own experiences. We do not and cannot guarantee the accuracy or completeness of any information. Chaos2Cured podcast cannot give medical or health advice. All discussion is based upon our personal experiences and meant for general and educational purposes. This podcast is not a substitute for professional help or for diagnostic purposes for yourself or another. Chaos2Cured podcast always encourages you to consult an appropriate professional.